Hello and welcome to another interior real estate photography tutorial. Today we're going to be looking at breaking down everything that I do to make shooting the Flambient method super duper simple. I'm going to show you exactly what my camera settings were, how I edit each photo in Lightroom, what photos I take, where I pop my flashes, and then how I edit them in Photoshop, and then bring them back into Lightroom for the final image. This is the simplest way I have found to do this after many months of trial and error, different lights, umbrellas, all reflectors, everything. If you've watched any of my other tutorials out there, yes, a lot of this stuff works and it works really well, but is it the most practical? Is it the fastest? No. This method that I'm going to show you works 99% of the houses you're going to shoot, and it is super duper simple and it is fast. That's what I like. High quality at a fast pace, because when you start getting busy in this business, if you start getting more than 3 listings every day, you're going to need to come up with a system to where you are in and out of a house 45 minutes to an hour. And then same thing with your editing, trying to get that down under an hour. So you're only, you're out in the field shooting, say you got 3 listings, now you're only working 3 hours, you're coming back 3 hours, that's 6 hours minus drive time, or add that all in, and that's a day. It's pretty much a full day for me, and that's how it works. So again, this is going to be the basics, and I'm going to go slowly and walk it through, so if you're new to this, you'll appreciate this. Let's get going. Here is the ambient shot, and I will always do that first. And so on this particular shoot, and I've actually been going back to my Olympus EM1 Mark II with that Leica 7.5mm. So if you're unfamiliar with that, that is Micro Four Thirds. If you're full frame mindset, just think of Micro Four Thirds as the sensor's twice as small, so everything is a 2 times crop. So a 7.5mm is actually going to be a 15mm, and you could also double that with your aperture. That's actually why I love shooting Micro Four Thirds, because I can shoot at f4 on Micro Four Thirds, and it is performing, as far as depth of field goes, everything in focus is like an f8. Okay, so that means that I can even go down to like f2.8 and I'm still at 5.6, if that makes sense. So all I'm going to do initially is I am going to set my profile to standard, because I like that. Notice the difference. By default, it is Adobe Color. See how the shadows are a little bit darker? Just by changing it to standard, watch that fireplace right here. Watch those shadows lift. There you go. And again, I will just bump up the shadows, the overall exposure. Notice how I'm doing that. I'm grabbing the center here of the histogram up here. And okay, for me, it's just easier and faster to grab that. So when you're exposing for a room, in camera, you're trying to get that histogram, and hopefully your camera has a histogram on it, and you're trying to push that. The majority of the histogram should be right of center. So you just want to make sure that you're not blowing out the highlights within the room, because we want to try to use a lot of that ambient layer for lighting the entire room. So if a house has a lot of natural light, then we want to take advantage of that. And so that leads me to my next point is, when I'm on site, I really prefer lights off. Let's keep moving. I might want to bump the shadows a little bit. So what we're really doing now is we're creating a preset. So really, I don't touch anything else. Maybe drop the highlights a little bit, but again, we don't need to worry about that. I'm not touching the sharpening. I'll do that at the very end. And we don't need to do the profile correction. If it does choose it automatically, then don't touch this. But I'm using that, like I said, the Leica, and I pretty much think that it's this one. Lightroom, I don't know. I almost think this is Leica. It's OOWA. And when I do that, it goes right to the 15mm, which again, like I said, I'm shooting on 7.5, so it is a 15mm equivalent. And if you notice that, it does pretty much fix that distortion. So I'm going to leave it like that. And that's what I do. So I'm not going to touch the vertical. Actually, you know what? We can do the verticals. We'll do that now, just so we know whether or not it's, the vertical is correct. So I leave that. Sometimes vertical with Lightroom is hit or miss. 9 times out of 10, it does work. But a lot of other times I'll hit the guided tool, and that seems to work a little bit better. But by default, you know what? I'm going to take that back. Let's turn that off. We'll worry about your verticals and horizontals at the very end. That's something that can be fixed at the end. So let's keep moving. We're not going to touch the crop vignetting. That's it. So what I want to do is I want to create a preset over here so I don't have to do this every single photo. So see where it says presets up here? We're going to hit plus, create preset, and we're going to call this Layowa Initial. And that's it. And make sure all this stuff is checked, and then hit create. So down here, it's Layowa Initial. What I like to do to make things even faster is if I am working on a site, I'll get it pretty close with the Layowa Initial on my first image, and then I'll just come over here and go copy, and then copy. That's it. So then I move to my flash shot, which is going to be, let's see. Okay, so what was I editing? I wasn't even editing the... Okay, so this was... I'm sorry, this was the flash shot. So let's go to the ambient shot. Doesn't matter. They all need the same preset on them. So there you go. So let me just reset this and show you one more time. We're just going to paste those settings in. But if I reset this and went over here to the Layowa Initial, it would do the same thing. Okay, so that looks really good as far as the ambient layer. This is the flash pop. Now, you can see my reflection in the window. You can try to move around and see if you can get out of the way of yourself. But what I do is I typically will leave this and don't worry about that shadow. I'm only really using this for the windows because look, the ambient has plenty of natural light coming in. So I use this one to fix myself, and that's the one I was editing. So this is the one that we were using as like a window repair shot. So all I'm going to do now is hold down command, and I'm going to click on the number 2 and number 1, and then right click, edit in, open as layers in Photoshop. Alright, so now once we are in Photoshop, we're going to have our 3 layers sitting on top of each other. So we have the ambient layer on top. Underneath that is our regular flash pop, and then the flash repair layer. So really all I do is, besides my ambient layer, for my flash shot, I'll just hold my flash up. It really depends. It depends on the room. A lot of times I will have it just above my head and pop a flash, either tilted slightly back or slightly forward. Now the other thing that I have started to do, now if you notice that if the room is lit well in the back of the room, but maybe the foreground isn't that light, I will actually do, and I've started actually doing this no matter what, is using flash even for the ambient. So for example, this is just the Godox V1, this is just your standard flash, but now I'm back to using the Godox 8600, 600 watt seconds of power, as opposed to like maybe 50 watts power wattage of the, of a standard flash. So I have a lot more power with the 8600. So what I've found is a sweet spot is for my ambient layer, 1/16 power with that flash tilted slightly back, just enough to sprinkle enough flash into the room. And that's actually what I did here. So this actually is a blend of flash and ambient. And then I will take, and typically, like if the room has a lot of natural light, I'm at like 1/8 to 1/4 power, holding that flash up, and boom, lighting the entire scene. Now I don't care. I'm watching my ceilings. If I have ceiling fans, if the ambient layer has a good ceiling, then I don't care if I'm getting ceiling fan shadows. I'm just worried about getting those window views back in just a little bit. So that's my method on shooting my ambient and flash layer. So like I said, it's basically, if we didn't have this reflection here of myself in the window, then these two images would blend perfectly together. So all I do is I take and make sure my ambient layer is highlighted, but before we do that, some of you are going to probably want to auto-align your layers. So make sure that you have the top layer clicked. We're going to shift and click on the bottom one to highlight all 3. We're going to come up to Edit, Auto-Align Layers, make sure Auto is selected, and click OK. And if there is any slight adjustment, it will fix that. Typically, I don't do this because I'm really not touching my camera at all except to bring that shutter speed down. That is it. But it did. It adjusted them, and they were off just a tiny, tiny bit. Would it have been enough to notice? Maybe, maybe not. So it is maybe a good habit to get into that. And there is a method to doing a preset or a function or an action in Photoshop. I have tutorials on that. Go find that video on how to create actions in Photoshop. So now that we have that, we're going to go back and make sure our ambient layer is selected. We're going to just click this layer mask down here. Just click on that, because all I want to do is blend back in some of that flash on the windows. Come up here, make sure your flow is at 5%. It's just going to be an easier flow to handle, so you're just lightly brushing back in that flash. Because if you have the flow too high, you're going to be it's going to be harder to blend it seamlessly. So I just sit here and just paint. And I'm using the mouse pad on my laptop, and this is how I work. Some people have the tablet with the pen and all that. I've never tried that. It seems pretty cool though. And see, I'm using the flash to get rid of that glare on the TV also. And again, I like the natural light, so I am going to just keep brushing this in. And now we can almost see myself. We got to get myself out of there. Now you move that layer to the top. See that? So we just got to take that repair layer, bring it to the top, click layer mask, Command I to invert it to black. Make sure white is selected now. And again, there's a few ways to do the same thing in Photoshop. Whatever method you find that works for you. But I've always found to just click that layer mask, Command I to invert it real quick. But there we go. We masked ourselves out, and this is it. I really don't get too creative. I like to show how the house looks. If it has nice natural light, I like to typically just leave it how it's going to look when you come to see it. Now, let's come down here to flatten image. And this is where I Command S to save it to bring it back into Lightroom. And this is where I put a little final bump on it, because to me it looks a little like it needs a little punch of contrast or something. So again, just like what we did for the initial preset, I have an interior final bump just like that. And let's go back up. What did I do? I brought up the clarity a little bit. That'll add like a little bit of sharpness. I dropped my blacks down. I bumped those shadows up again. I brought the highlights down, and I bumped the vibrance up to 30. So sometimes I don't, my particular preset, I think maybe the blacks go too much, but a little trick you can do is holding down Option, and you can slide this, and all the black is where you're clipping the blacks. So I like to bring that back to where you're just starting to see it in the center of the frame, and then let off. And to me, that looks super duper nice. I just think it has just a nice natural light look to it. But really, that's all that I do. I have my ambient shot, and again, try that. Try playing with your flash power to also light your ambient. If you're finding that it's really high contrast, maybe get to the point where your windows are just a little bit blown out, and then just pop that flash just to light it up. That's going to help you when you're adjusting your highlights and your shadows in your ambient layer to reintroduce the main flash shot. I hope this is helping. I hope it wasn't too complicated. If you have any questions, I answer every single comment. And make sure to hit the subscribe button, because I'm releasing tutorials all the time. Thanks for watching.